already.
Well,
I'm coming off a little nappy nap.
I was gonna say we've only been out a couple of weeks and already you're out of the zone. Everything's been busy and stuff and like working hard.
Welcome to well, first of all, I should say we're live, and second, I'm gonna say welcome to 2 hours of watching Nick struggle with back pain and try not to wince and keep the energy up. So we'll see how that goes. So
Who needs
wincing over here?
Back pain is the worst though. So because there's no way you can get comfortable, you can't sleep properly, you can't. It's terrible. So
yeah, that's why I was taking a nap, is because like I was laying down on a heat pad.
Oh,
and I'm a belly sleeper, and right. So like it's weird because when I lay on the heat pad, I'm laying face up, and so like I'll doze off, and it's not like the way that I sleep, and so it's weird because I'm not sleeping like all the way. It's like off and on. Oh no! Oh.
So you're now just affecting everybody with yawns.
yeah, I'm doing the whole yawn transfer thing.
I'm sorry. I'm going to try to keep the energy high because we're back. We're back after being off for a couple weeks. You had stuff. I had stuff.
Yep.
Yeah.
In fact, because what did I have the week before? Because last week I was going away and you were really snowed under.
Last week you actually did your homework and you got a sub, and I said no, I can't do it. And the week before, and I really appreciated that. Oh, excuse me. Oh, the week before you had. Let's see here.
I need to go back through my messages. So.
I'm looking now. What was that? That was
I'd been on trials.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, we
Headspace.
This was we'd been out in the field for 2 days, doing trials with tanks and stuff.
I saw the pictures,
which was
cool.
Brilliant fun. And I couldn't put half the pictures up because my client wants a bit of commercial secrecy at the moment because around patents and things like that, which is completely legitimate. The main reason we're taking all the photos was for the analysis. We were doing the usability analysis. And but they're all sat there at the moment. I've got some cool video and cool stuff that I just can't show yet. But yeah, by the time we got back, it was when you just got that bit where you're just fresh off and you need to get everything down that you can think of before you forget. And so we had that and then other bits of work, and I just got snowed under, and it was like, no, I can't think. But it was fun. It was cool.
Well, this story's cool tonight. I'm really excited that you and I were able to get together to talk about this one. I would have been really bummed if you weren't on the show for this topic tonight. This one specifically. It's really cool. Shall we talk a little bit, a preview, if you will, of tonight's?
Well, yeah. So it's doing the whole regulations on human spaceflight, and it's an interesting one because I guess we get to talk a bit about the point of regulation, the point of all that sort of stuff, but also the are we going to be? Is there a hampering of what the future could look like? It's not dissimilar to what we talked about regulation in AI. Because ages ago I was like, no, don't regulate AI because you're just going to stifle it. And now I'm very much of no, we need to regulate AI now. Can we do it, please? We've reached the point. So I think with this, there's there is already, and I'm quite looking forward to discussing it. What do you think? Is there any sort of hot takes that you've got before we get in?
Yeah, and I apologies for anybody watching now, but I'm going to repeat this with the initial thoughts. It's like our Ocean Gate discussion, but in space.
Yes.
Space.
That nice echo there. I like that.
Yeah, so I mean, there's going to be a lot of similar themes. You're right, across the AI stories that we've talked about, but also with the Ocean Gate thing and the regulatory piece of that discussion. But I think it's worthwhile because there's I feel like, and this pun is intended. I feel like FAA regulations are more grounded than in reality than
See where you went there.
yeah. So
But
I mean, it'll be an interesting chat.
I was going to say there's some bits around it that I think I don't know how much actual human factors stuff we'll get into, but certainly principles and things around regulation, why it's important. From I mean, given it's all around human space, it is all strategic human factors, I would suggest. But it'll be interesting to see what comes up, and it's and again that you're right that that analogy with or the linkage to the Ocean Gate stuff is similar because it's unregulated. I hadn't realized that actually there was a moratorium on regulation at the moment on the American side, and given that we're not launching anything here in the UK yet, though we've got something in the pipeline. Yeah, I think it's all cool stuff. But actually, just to completely change the subject, because we can talk about this in the pre-show rather than the show itself. Did you read the article I sent you about The Line, the previous episode that we did? And now they've started to build it.
Yeah.
They're like crazy. I think we need to reach out to them and sort of say, hey, we covered your thing. Can we come and because you said about maybe doing a series on it. You reckon we could get them to pay for us to go and fly out there, say once a month, and do an update? And maybe, I mean, I'd be willing to offer some sort of free human factors coverage if they were willing to take us out there for I don't know, a week every 6 weeks or something like that.
That'd be kind of cool. I did see that, and I think what I was thinking is like, what we should do is, we're close to episode 300 here.
Oh,
and so what we could do, let's get to 300, and then 301, we 301 through 310, we start looking at some of the stories that we've done in the past and do follow-ups on them.
Oh, that's a good idea. Yes.
And then, I don't know, like the 300s could be the series of like the follow-ups. I don't know. Like, I'd still want to cover new news, but it could be interesting when some of those things come up, right? Like The Line or...
What I thought was... So, an interesting concept I saw the other day. So, a few of the channels I watch on YouTube now, I'm really into sort of car restoration and stuff at the moment. I'm not doing it. I just like watching other people do it. But a lot of them are launching second channels now. And so their idea of the channels are, they're a bit more informal, they're a bit more almost behind the scenes-ish, but different content. And also these are full-time YouTubers, is what they do. But we could do a second channel of follow-ups. You could almost make that an absolute... So you keep the main channel for primary news, but you could do the follow-up channels.
You could.
Is a different way of doing it. Having just obviously the conversation we had in the pre-show,
yeah,
around the amount of work that we've got to do and fitting stuff in. But yeah, let's create another channel.
See, that's the thing, Barry. It's like we have so many good ideas, and if this was our full-time job, I'm sure we could make that work.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you watch how... I mean, you have to put some serious dedication into it, and I think you would have to go almost exclusively YouTube to make it work, as in, or go visual, because that's kind of where the real money is. But to be able to go in and like get all the footage and all that sort of stuff, and spend the time editing, cutting, and all that sort of stuff, yeah, you can make it work. But you've also got to... We would also have to broaden our scope as well to become wider reaching.
Yeah.
Which, getting that balance right would be really tricky, I think, because we're geeky enough around the HF stuff to keep the core of what it is that we're doing, but just broadening it enough to be slightly more widely appealing without losing the core of what we're after, I think is a real skill.
Yeah. It's interesting because when this podcast first launched, the goal was to kind of be informative for the masses.
Mm-hmm.
What we found, the masses were not listening. Who was listening? Human factors people. Let's make a show for human factors people. And so it's like, I'm sure there's a market for that. In fact, I would argue that you and I, perhaps the people that listen to this show, would be the market for that, where the intersection between pop culture, science news, human factors. I mean, like, we geek out about the impact to the human.
Yes. But we do have a wide range of... We're happy to talk on a wide range of topics.
Right. And I think... I'm trying not to give away some secret sauce here, because I think there's certainly some magic that can happen when you focus in on human psychology as the focus rather than human factors.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's a massive interest there. And so, like, almost shifting the focus to human psychology
mm-hmm.
and shoving human factors into those discussions might be a better way to get it to the masses than a human factors focus first. And this is something that I've thought of.
Yeah.
You know, over long periods of time, how to do something like this.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because again, you know, with the 1202 stuff, you sit there and go, what is it you're trying to achieve? Because I get, you know, fairly consistent, and I'm getting fairly consistent numbers now. This season has been a bit hit and miss, mostly miss, because I'm not getting the number of interviews that I wanted, and it's all my own fault. I'm just flat out. I'm just so busy that it's difficult to do. Ironically, that you'd have expected this year to be better, because I can almost ask anybody in theory, and they would come and do it. It's just I don't want to rush stuff and do them badly, and so yeah, it's hard work. So I'm looking at probably getting 12 out this year instead of the 26 that I was hoping for. But what's the audience for that? I do have, it's an HF audience, but it's also wider. I know people who listen to it who know nothing about human factors except what they've learned on the podcast, and then some of the wider stuff. Do I expect it to take off and make me millions? It'd be amazing if it did, but it's not going to, because it's not. I don't put the amount of effort into it that other people do, for what people now expect out of a basic YouTube channel.
Mm-hmm.
Because some of the stuff people do is crazy, brilliant, but crazy. Anyway, so maybe next year we'll take over the YouTube world.
Maybe I've also been thinking about other angles too, and this I feel is almost like skirting a private discussion, Barry, that you and I should have offline.
Probably.
But is there a strategy that we can employ that might perhaps result in a better way to... We need to have this discussion offline, because I'm struggling here to not give away secret sauce here. I'm going to put it to the private chat for you.
Yeah, it's but it is fun watching you trying to say without actually saying what you want to say. What else was I going to say? Oh yes, because the other thing I want to talk about it is one of my one more things, but it's exam day today, so it's exam results, and the I I thought about that.
Yeah, I've been thinking about ways to pitch that too.
And I think, yeah, I don't think I don't think they're necessarily in the right place to make that happen. These guys are, though. I think.
I think I know what you're about to type, but yeah, okay. See, and I'm thinking maybe these guys.
Oh, see, I'm falling out with them guys.
Oh, are you?
Oh, I think they're a complete and utter waste of space.
Okay.
I'm completely on the warpath for them at the moment. Because, and talk about everybody who's watching or listening to this now be going, they're now trying to guess.
They're trying to guess who we're talking about, and we're
about.
just writing a bunch of acronyms back and forth.
And this is quite cool. But that one, I think, completely missing the point of why they're there.
Oh, man.
So, and it's actually a conversation I'm going to take to that organization because I can. And there's two others like it. In fact, I've got a meeting in a couple of weeks with this one organization, which you may not have heard of, which is that one.
Oh, yeah, I know them.
Yeah. I want to not know them because I think they've got the same problem as the other one, that they completely miss the point of why they're there, and I think the technical term was waste of space and waste of money.
Amazing. So, but see if they could do that.
Possibly.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Okay, this is way too hard to have a private discussion when we're typing back and forth. It's kind of funny though, because I'm wondering how much people are picking up about this discussion that is.
I was going to say, if anybody is watching, listening, who has a vague idea about who we might be talking about, just drop it in the chat, and we'll see just how subtle we are being.
Yeah, I'd be curious.
And then might delete it very quickly. But yeah, so yes, there is some of that.
All I'm saying with all this, by the way, is that there are resources that are available that I feel we have the technical, practical experience to turn those resources into something great.
Brilliant. Yes. I mean, again, the discussions that we had, or we're starting to have with Sharon at HF ESA around their conference, it's not going to happen in quite the same way. 'Cause I think it's difficult for us to do if we're not there, or at least one of us are not there, to make it happen. But I think there is something in that for us longer term to think about. Right, how do we take this on the road in an effective way that means that we can easily detail? And I think HFES this year or something like that will be a vehicle, because obviously last year we did it worked well, but there was a lot you in particular put a lot of planning and a lot of background into that, and it took up a lot of effort to make it happen. The more you do it, the easier it becomes, and the better we get at it, to the point that if we could turn around and say, right, for I don't know, $1 million, we can go out and do that, cover your conference, and it'll be amazing. We might come down a bit off the $1 million, but I'd be happy to do it for $1 million.
$1 million would be a good price point.
Yeah, I think it just rolls off the tongue really well. Or $999,999 and 99 cents, just to bring it under that $1 million barrier.
Yeah, I mean the psychology involved with bringing it sub 1 million.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Rather than them other really expensive ones.
The 99 cents will get you. That'll be.
Oh, we can dream.
Oh, okay. All right.
Right. We could do the show tonight, aren't we?
Yes. Okay, so I realized that we started talking about this story and we never said it. You can see the title of this thing, but we're talking about FAA and regulations on commercial human spaceflight. We're going to speculate about those regulations tonight. Also, what we do in the pre-show is kind of preview. I mean, we do this in the post-show too, but I have the linky link here. If you all want to be part of the show and decide what we talk about next time.
Yes, I need to go into... See, you do that by going to Patreon and using the QR code on the screen there.
The QR code.
Oh, we've already got a vote. That's cool. So, because we are 291, aren't we? So for 292, so next week's episode, assuming we don't do what we've done for the past 3 weeks, and we might see you in a month. I mean, who knows?
Look here. This is why. Okay, look. By the way, this is why I've started putting tentative date of August 31st.
Clever. So the stories are, in no particular order, social media algorithms exploit how we learn from our peers. Okay. Highway safety behavioral strategies for rural areas. The Twitter X dilemma: trust as a finite resource in UX. Anyway, let's go into that in a second. Modified virtual reality tech can measure brain activity. That's true. I saw some of that this week. Anyway, we'll do that. And if you have your own suggestion, feel free to chuck it as an other. And make sure you comment and tell us what that story is. Which I had one today that I actually chucked into our lab Discord, but worth sharing possibly with the audience here, because we know they won't tell anybody else. It's fine. But there's been, as part of the experimentation around simulating who should be living on Mars, we've actually found that there's one personality type that should not be part of that colony. So they've done some, and it's really quite cool. Because they've come up with a magic number, which says, I'm just going to quickly scan the article because they've got a specific number that the colony should be. Where is the lowest number necessary to sustain a colony on Mars is 22 people. 22 is their magic.
The lowest?
The lowest, yeah. But I think there's where did they say? So they've been doing this through a whole bunch of simulations. Simulations were ran for 28 years with different numbers of people inside the colonies, ranging from 10 to 170. The lowest number was 22, but they said that so if you're a neurotic, then you shouldn't be going on this because you'll. Because you're highly competitive and aggressive, and unable to cope with boredom and change the routine, then you're not going to be any good. You're going to get frustrated and potentially, like, I don't know, murder people. I don't know. So yeah, if you're neurotic, I'd just take your don't put that application into that fast trip. So if you wanted to talk about that story, for example, you could copy and paste that into the comments on Patreon and click other, and it would be
good. We'll check in with the votes in a little bit. I just want to let everybody know that I'm going to take away this little scanny doohickey, cool. aka QR code 543. Scan it now if you want it. 2, 1. Okay, it's gone.
Have you got a feeling or a guide?
Are you asking me to influence our audience? I will do that in the post show.
Okay, I'm going to do mine pre-show.
Okay.
I don't know. With these, I think normally I've definitely got one or two that I don't want to talk about because I'm not interested. And I think people are starting to trust me as well because they're starting to take my advice and steer clear of them. Highway safety for behavioural strategies for rural areas. That doesn't really do much for me. It could be a bit triggering at the moment because of what is going on in our country here and what they're doing with road safety and the way that they're abusing research. But so maybe
it's an important discussion.
It is, but it's a dull discussion.
I had a moment the other night where I was telling my wife, I was like, you know what? Let's just say like this supply chain logistics thing doesn't work out. I'd be okay with going into like highway transportation, road safety. Like I geek out about that stuff.
It is weird, isn't it? Because there's actually a bunch of stuff that when it comes to putting in strategy, putting in like rules, regulations, and if I'm in the role, love it. Absolutely love it. I love digging into putting real effect-based stuff in. When you dig into the why you need X, Y, Z in place, I really enjoy doing that sort of stuff. Talking about it and trying to make it a topic. I don't necessarily have them skills.
Oh man.
So I would perhaps knock that one out. We've been sort of edging around the Twitter X dilemma, or really just what is going on there for a good few weeks now.
I think the trust aspect within that specific story is the interesting piece, and would be a really, really interesting thing to attack there, because we've talked a little bit about Twitter as a dumpster fire.
And I actually messaged Elon Musk last week as well, in a plea to get him to stop doing it, because for me, Twitter's one of these. It's one of the OGs, isn't it? It's between that and Facebook, they're the two that probably have shaped social development the most, for better and for worse. But other platforms have come and gone. There was platforms before Facebook and Twitter, but they were just not as successful, or not as the longevity wasn't there. And he's just taking this and just I think now it's just going to fail, because he's just dumpster fire. It's just burning. It's horrible. Which is a shame. And now the most recent news about taking blocking away, which we get into, is just sad. But the modified virtual reality tech can measure brain activity. Having not read the story, that'd be quite cool. I was looking at some VR headsets this week with inbuilt EEG and eye tracking and pulse oxygen. It didn't have heart rate in there. That was slightly different, but it had all this integrated into the headset, and I was like, that's really cool, and I want to play. And hopefully, if I get my way, I'm going to play with it fairly soon.
Cool.
Anyway, we'll check in with that after.
Yeah, we'll check in. The current vote totals. I should refresh this page in case other people have voted. It looks like we are steering clear of the highway safety story.
Yay.
Which is a bummer. But we got 7 votes so far. If you want to vote on that, either scroll back a little bit to get that QR code, or you know what, I'll just put it back up. Here you go.
Right, given that we're about to do a show in 2 minutes time, are you happy with your one more thing? Oh no, you put them in there.
Oh yeah, I'm happy with that. What I have not done is the answers to the. I'll wing that. That's okay.
Yeah, all 3 of them could be. They're definitely there. They could be quite short, and that could be quite insulting if needs.
Let's go hard on the insults. Let's go. Let's just make them.
We don't want to offend anybody, but if they keep asking the same question all the time, do they not listen to the show and realize that they're asking the same question that we answer probably once every 3 weeks? Anyway, yes, everything else is all good. I guess the only bit I wanted to put into, because you know more about this from the US side, about because you have lots of different regulation that where it comes down. It'd be interesting to understand, if you know, certainly with the transport background, how analogous this committee would be to any others. But apart from that, I think we're all good.
The only thing that I am not ready for is the energy. This low back pain is just like zapping me of energy. Like it's insane.
It's draining.
I'm sitting here going.
Well, that was me. What, a few weeks ago when I had the trapped nerve in my spine?
Yeah,
and I just couldn't do anything. Especially when you're like popping more pills than a Smartie packet. Anyway, it's that time.
Popping pills like Smarties. Yeah. All right. Hey, I think I'm glad we said that before we went live, or not live, but before we recorded the episode, because that would have got us banned in several countries. So because we're discussing drug use. Anyway, prescription drug use. All right. Well, we're gonna do a little intro thing. Be back with energy.
Whoop, whoop.
Focus.
We can do this.
Then,
It's fine.
okay. Here's the intro.
Welcome to Human Factors Cast, your weekly podcast for human factors, psychology, and design.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Human Factors Cast. This is episode 291. We're recording this episode live on August 24th, 2023. I'm your host, suffering from low back pain, and I'm joined today by Mr. Barry Kirby.
Hey, great to see you. It's been such a long time.
Hey, it has been such a long time, but I'm glad we're back. We got a great show for you lined up tonight. We're going to be diving into some exciting news about the FAA launching a new committee to explore regulations on commercial human spaceflight. So we'll speculate on that. Later on, we'll be answering some burning questions from our amazing community on struggling to land a job as a human factors engineer, job titles to look out for, and leveling up from mid-level to senior. But first, some programming notes for you all. We would like some reviews.
Oh.
If you could do that for us, that would be very kind. That takes a little bit of your time, but it's free for you to do. Really helps the show. Tell your friends about us. That also really helps the show. And if you have financial means to do so, supporting us on Patreon is great. Okay, that's my pitch. Barry, what's the latest over at 1202?
So at 12:02, I've got a new interview with Dr. Mark Young. He is the current president-elect of the CIHF and will be taking over from me in April. But he's just gone from industry to back into academia, and we talk about the future of HF and the way HF reviews itself from an academic perspective and from an industry perspective, and what we can learn from each other. So again, one of these, as always, amazing interview, really good guest, and well worth a listen.
I love that. I love that for you.
Thank you.
I love that. You know what I like for us? Let's get into the news.
Let's do that.
That's right. This is the part of the show all about human factors news. Barry, what is our story this week?
So this week, we talked about the FAA launching new committee to explore regulations on human spaceflight, human commercial spaceflight. You know, if I can't even get the heading of the story right, what have we got hope for the rest of it? Let's give it a shot. So the FAA is taking the first steps towards establishing regulations for commercial human spaceflight. This is a significant development in an industry that is rapidly growing and seen an increase in the number of people traveling to space. The FAA has formed a rulemaking committee that will gather recommendations from major stakeholders such as Blue Origin, Virgin Galactic, and SpaceX, and submit them next summer. However, it's important to note that the FAA does not have any rulemaking authority of occupant safety on board vehicle launches. On board launch vehicles. They can only regulate the safety of people on the ground during the launch. To change this, Congress would need to act, and there's a possibility they will do so soon. Currently, there is a moratorium of commercial human spaceflight regulations, but is set to expire this October unless extended. Advocates for extending the moratorium argue that the FAA does not yet have the expertise or resources to implement new safety regulations. On the other hand, RAND Corporation suggests the moratorium should expire, as there is a lack of transparency and data sharing going on amongst commercial spaceflight companies. This lack of transparency poses a risk for safety and prevents companies from learning from each other's experiences. The debate over establishing regulations for commercial human spaceflight centers around finding the balance between ensuring safety and allowing the industry to grow and innovate. So, Nick, what are your thoughts on bringing a regulatory committee into the great journey that humankind can hope to make?
You all right over there? You good with the?
I'm done now. I'm over. I'm over it.
Okay, it's gonna be a show, folks. Like I'm over here struggling with my back. Barry's over there struggling with words. It's
which is not a problem, except for the fact a podcast that people are listening to, and the only thing that they're hearing is words, and perhaps it's just
Look, I'll promise to mute when I like wince in pain if you promise to try to read the words right.
See, I no promises.
Okay.
Buckle up, it's going to be a wild ride.
Yikes. All right. So, okay, here's my thoughts. I think this story is interesting from the perspective of there's going to be a lot of crossover with our Ocean Gate episode, but in space. I think this is really cool because there's the similar talks that we were having about why you might want to regulate commercial human travel in particularly dangerous terrain. I'm trying to whether it's the bottom of the ocean or up in space, I think there's a lot of good reason to do so, and it'll be interesting to see what types of regulations go into it, and especially with the sharing of information across various companies. I think there's a lot of interesting takes that we can do with that, and where is the line with proprietary information, and what's that balance between trying to push those boundaries and actually establish boundaries by regulatory efforts. I don't know. There's a lot of different places that we can go with this discussion, but I want to know what your initial thoughts here are, Barry.
So I think as long as we can get the human factor stuff up front, I almost don't care. When we've talked about this type of regulation with AI, I've been very much of the belief that we've got to go light touch, because you will, if we don't care, if we throw the baby out with the bathwater, you stifle creativity, we lose innovation, and we don't deliver what it is that we want to deliver. And a really good example of that is NASA. So NASA is very risk averse, hugely risk averse, and given episodes in its history, quite rightly so. But then when you've had a company like SpaceX who've come in and had a very different approach, they've not put people at risk, but they've been willing to fail and fail fast, to learn and to keep going on. So the number of launches they put together, the number of landings they put together that ended in failure, but they were always learning in order to then do stuff, shows that there is an ability that if you, within reason, have a lighter touch to regulation, we can maybe progress quicker and progress better in a way that perhaps we weren't expecting. However, if you look at what we've done in the aviation world and the way we now keep people safe in the way that we do, is there an opportunity for us to learn here quicker, and have the right sort of regulation rather than just going completely hard over, which we maybe have done in the past? So can we make the type of regulation intelligent? Can we make it in a way that that is keeping people safe, but is not stifling the creativity, still allowing people to act? And I guess the other element of it as well is there an element of commercialism, capitalism in this that we are now heavily leaning on? Are we just suggesting that actually almost state actors do not have as big a place in spaceflight anymore. That we're needing this stuff in space because NASA is not the only fruit, and the other, the other government-based space organizations. We are now in the hands of commercial commercial operators in the same way as road transport is now the government doesn't build its own cars. We have enough. We have companies to do that for us. So how do we make that happen? There's a lot of places where we go, where we could go. Nick, where do you want to start? Have you got any thoughts?
Yeah, you said let's start with the human factors piece up front. I think that's right, and I want to. Yikes! Back. I almost want to start with like the purpose of why we have regulations in the first place. I mean, that to me is human factors. It's really to get at the safety and the effectiveness of these devices, and in this case, these machines that are taking us to dangerous environments, space. And I think really we're looking at this from the perspective of the human interactions with the system. So when you look at the approach that you just took and how you were comparing NASA and SpaceX, yes, NASA was a little bit more careful. They're government funded, and SpaceX kind of took that opposite approach. Let's fail fast, and learn a lot from those failures. The difference is that the failures on SpaceX's part were not involving humans. I mean, there's some things that regulations might be able to specify, especially when it comes to those failures and risking lives on the ground, especially with some of those failures, right? That might be something that we look at. But I think the main thing here that we're looking at is the human safety aspect of this. And that's why human factors and these regulations are going to be so critical here. I think there's a lot of interesting things that we can sort of point to when it comes to specifically the regulation side of things, and I'm thinking about this from a couple different approaches, right? You can kind of compare things with like the FAA standards for design, construction, maintenance of like aircraft, right? So I think there's standards out there for vehicle safety standards, and I think you could apply a lot of those same standards to spacecraft to make sure that a lot of the same inspections, modifications, all those things that undergo that regulation, that certification from the FAA perspective could still be applied to like spacecraft. I think there's other approaches that we could take. We could look at like crew training and requirements. We could look at the safety training protocols. Are you going to have to watch a pre-flight video on what happens if the spacecraft blows up in space, right? Like I think there's a lot of different ways that we could approach this, and that's the fascinating thing to me, is that a lot of this is a human factors discussion. We mentioned briefly the data sharing transparency piece. I think that's less interesting than some of the other things about like the operational procedures that people might have to take to get onto to plan out these flights, or the submitting things to air traffic control, ensuring the safe routes, all this stuff when it comes to space travel, because you have like a million different things happening with that environment, and then environmental considerations too. Like I'm just my head is exploding with a bunch of different ideas. I guess those are the things that I'm trying to think about, like, and then all the way through to like the informed consent and the post-flight stuff. All that is interesting to me. So we could dig into any of that, Barry. What do you think?
So I think for me, the place that I find truly interesting is being able to identify what do we learn, and what can we. So for me, the art of innovation is transferring from one domain to another. So really, what we're trying to do is cherry pick through the other domains, and the aerospace domain is the most analogous domain that we've got. It's the closest thing. So if we are on about commercializing spaceflight, which we are, so what are the analogies to your normal flight at the moment? So if you go and take a flight, you almost don't care which airliner you're boarding. It could be a Boeing aircraft, it could be an Airbus aircraft, it could be a McDonnell Douglas, it could be whatever. The way that you are treated at the airport is the same. You check your baggage, you do passport control, you do security, all that sort of stuff. That is independent of the way you do it. And I would assume that this is the way that the spaceflight will also hook up. You are going to have spaceports. We have a couple of spaceports here in the UK already. It's just somebody got an old airfield and put spaceport on the front of it. But you take off from Cape Kennedy or Cape Canaveral, them sort of things, and almost no matter what you're using, you go and do that. So the way we treat people there will be the same. When you get on your aircraft, you're going to go get into a certain type of seat. It's going to be forward facing. It's going to have a certain amount of leg space because that's regulated. It's going to have safety features in there like the face mask that drop down on depressurization, and so there's a whole lot of stuff that is regardless of your regardless of the supplier, regardless of the company that's doing it, that is, and the airline that's running, there's going to be stuff there because it's built on regulation. So what is it we learned from that is good? And I should imagine a lot of that will be the same. What we will differ on, I think, and where we want to look to innovate is we can see some of these things already. That if you look at take a spacesuit, that's something that we get excited by from a human factors perspective. That we have that NASA has a spacesuit that looks what you would call a spacesuit. It looks big and bulky and clunky and just what you'd expect to see. I was blown away when I first saw the SpaceX spacesuits because they were lean, they were sleek, there was something out of a futuristic space flight. Yet they still fulfilled the need of what it is that they were trying to do. Then we could also touch on the use of autonomy, because both NASA and I think the Russian equivalents are very sort of mandrolic in the way that they work. They don't like to rely on autonomy very much, whereas the Dragon capsule from SpaceX is almost the other way. It's been designed to be flown remotely or autonomously. The cool, interesting interface designs, which I was trying to desperately watch when it was on the telly, they're advisory. They're not meant to be interacted with by the crew unless it's an emergency situation. So very, very different. So I guess I've gone about the FAA a lot and the analogy to air flight. But do you think there's other domains out there that we could be learning from, and that we should be taking or steering clear of?
I not so much from like the steer clear. Like there's a lot of different things that we could look at from other industries. I think the interesting thing to me is that we're looking at the FAA, and is the FAA the right one to regulate this? Is there perhaps a global organization, since spaceflight would truly be international? And is there like a global set of standards that we could put into place to sort of look at this from a worldwide perspective, right? Rather than just a US FAA focused. I mean, it might start with that, but I think in terms of applying from other domains, yeah, I think there's a lot to be learned, especially from like we were talking about with OceanGate, like what kind of regulations would be applied in that space, and especially when it comes into these extreme environments, right? I think for me the interesting thing is, you're right, there are a lot of, I guess, differences from traditional like air travel that we can look at and pick apart here, and particularly from the perspective of the passengers. That I mean, there's obviously a lot of different things that we could look at here, and I'm thinking about like the full process, start to finish, right? Even from the vehicle design aspect of it, right? We could start to think about how these are facing extreme conditions, and so like we talked about with OceanGate, how how are we going to design these vessels to withstand things like vacuum, radiation, microgravity, reentry, all these things that are unique to spaceflight, that you don't necessarily get in traditional air travel. But then also sort of looking at, like I said, the passengers. And I think this is where it gets really interesting when we start thinking about some of the physiological things that are going on with people. You have to have a pressurized uh, airplane, right? So like, how are you going to handle this with like space suits? Extended periods in space are challenging for astronauts who
Mm.
are up there for a long time. And when we think about human spaceflight commercial travel, we can't just isolate it to these instances that we're thinking about. At least when I say human spaceflight commercial travel, I think there's probably a tendency to think about what we're doing today. Meaning, you take billionaires up for a couple seconds, maybe an hour or two in space, and then you come back down. And that's low Earth orbit. That's not even, like deep space. Okay. But I'm starting to think about even further down the line where, what if we have moon bases and we're starting to transport people from the Earth to the moon, or from the moon to Mars, or from Earth to Mars? And so these are the types of things that I think we have to start to establish some of these things early, so that way we're starting to think about it, right? So the extended periods in space affecting the human body in ways that we're not necessarily accustomed to with traditional air travel, that the whole like muscle atrophy thing, bone density loss, radiation exposure, a bunch of other things that we're still learning about too.
Mm.
Um, so setting guidelines on sort of maximum duration of space flights, I think something like that might actually come into play here. Mandatory health checks before and after, all these onboarding procedures to make sure that the passengers are safe. I think that's just one thing to look at. We could even look at like in-flight emergencies. You brought it up, like what happens when depressurization happens. Like, the emergencies in space are significantly more complex than anything that you would experience in like traditional air travel. I think there's no option to land immediately. There's no, you can't divert your flight. I mean, you could, but I think you need to regulate some specific emergency response equipment, training, backup systems for these types of emergencies that could happen. And the training aspect for what happens in those emergencies is going to be drastically different from watching, put it over your face first and then put it over your child's face. Like, it's not going to be like that. You're going to be like, it's going to be completely different in space. I don't know where, like, I could go on. I have a whole list of things that I've like prepared for this.
There are so many different, what counts as space. So Trevor Dobbins has commented on LinkedIn, asking, are we talking about long space, or are we talking about like sort of balloons in sort of low Earth orbit and things like that as well? What counts as that? The thing that I want to chip into something that you mentioned earlier on around, yes, is the FAA the right organization to do this, or should we have a global organization? I mean, if one thing that could unite us as a global entity, it should be this, because actually it has done in the past, where we have Americans, Russians, Japanese, lots of different Chinese, lots of different countries coming together to work on the ISS, to work on these type of things. It's worth highlighting that India has had a successful landing this week. They've landed their Explorer on the south pole of the moon, and the first country to do so, which is amazing and brilliant, and congratulations to them for doing so. But when we talk about internationalism, pardon me, again, this is where we could learn from aviation to a certain extent about even just the basics of communication. So we talk around air traffic control. The language of air traffic control, the international language is English, and any pilot who flies has to be able to communicate in English on air traffic control. That's not just because of English arrogance, though that probably pays a little bit into it, but it's just saying that we have to have a common language. when Tim Peake, the UK astronaut, went and was on the ISS, he was saying that he had to go because he went and went on a Russian space mission and was in the Soyuz spacecraft. He had to learn Russian in order to interact with the capsule, with the controls, etc., and the crews and the training team. So we would need to pick a language and run with it in order to have a common understanding. Because you're right, if we end up having coming back to Earth, where do you land, all that sort of stuff. If we haven't, if we're still landing in the oceans at this point, or we might be landing elsewhere, we don't want to be spending time having to translate and all that sort of stuff. We need to pick a language and run with it, whichever one that is. So there are a lot of these international institutions that we're gonna have to get together and agree international regulation. Like I said, not just specific country regulation.
Yeah.
Yes.
You bring up a great point about the complexity with language as well, and I think that kind of goes along with, I don't know exactly what you said, but it sparked my mind to go, oh wait, we're gonna need ATC, but in space, air traffic control, but in space. We're gonna need like all the space traffic management to think about all the space debris that's up there too, like the debris with everything going on up there, all the satellites and space junk, and trying to navigate through that. It's already complex with the amount of satellites that we have up there, but thinking about in the future when perhaps every airport is a spaceport and we're transporting people to and from space, like it's going to be incredibly more complex when you start thinking about that. But yeah, you're right. There's even beyond the sort of practical everyday things, I think there's like astronauts go through this amazing psychological exam before they even go into space to make sure that they're all right. And like space can be incredibly isolating. if it's commonplace in the future, then maybe less so. But I think mental health is going to be a huge aspect of this as well. So starting to think about psychological assessments before flights. I think, like a TSA pre-check type thing where you have like a psych exam every couple years that says you're good to go for space flight. Like if you get isolated in space, you're gonna be all right while someone comes and rescues you. You're not gonna go crazy on board and like mutiny. I don't know. Like there's things to think about from that psychological well-being perspective too. I think
I mean, there's just to continue with that thought a second.
Yeah.
We've also got to think about the difference between passengers and crew. So if you're a passenger, yes, you're going on a one flight and every so often, fine, that's cool. But if you're crew and, like an airline, you're doing 2, 3, 4 flights a day, maybe, or whatever, whatever that looks like, that then gets us into the long-term, the long-term health of staff. Because if you're basically the pilot and you're the equivalent of an air steward, and doing them sort of jobs which require you to be there a long time, do you get to a point where actually you can't return to Earth because of the nature of the nature that gravity has upon your body, that actually you either have a limited number of flights that you can do within your lifetime, or within a period maybe you can only do one a month or something like that, or you basically realize that at some point your role is going to be to do this, and you have to live off the moon for the foreseeable, because you're spending so much time doing this type of work that actually it's life changing. Yeah, that's a new a new avenue of job thinking. If once you've agreed to do that job, that there's no return, that's going to be weird.
Yeah. I mean, that that is a whole consideration that I didn't even think of until you brought that up. I mean, like that's interesting from the crew perspective. Yeah, what is that long term impact on your body? I think another interesting thing to me when I think about this type of thing is we're thinking about it from like a terrestrial perspective from Earth. Like what happens when we start moving towards moon bases, Mars missions? I hinted at this earlier, but like what happens when we're like managing these landings off world? What are the protocols for those landing procedures that are very different from Earth in a lot of different ways? Space stations, moon bases, Mars bases, other celestial bodies. How do we manage resources on those, and what's the transfer from terrestrial to extraterrestrial? And I mean that in the sense of like the not Earth, not like ET. But then there's like, what happens if you encounter ET? Like, is there a protocol for that?
What happens if they've already got a solution to half these problems and they can just say, there you go. This is how we do it. I suppose we've gone a bit far, but it does raise. I mean, something we've talked about, climate change and things like that. And one of the things I keep on going back to, that in the fullness of time, we've got to get off the rock. The Earth will, the sun's going to explode at some point and go nova, etc., etc. I mean, billions of years time, but it's going to happen. And at that point, we need to have got off the rock and got out of the solar system. So at some point, if we don't do that, then we cease to exist as a species. So we won't have any human factors problems anymore. But we are going to have to hit these problems and encounter them and become the species that can live off the moon bases, off Mars, and springboard further out. So we are also then going to see a massive change in our evolution, and it's going to be interesting to see from a regulation perspective, to bring it back to the point, are we going to allow ourselves to evolve as a species in order to live in space? Because I think this is where the fear is about regulation, that you turn around and try and say, well, we must try and keep things exactly as they are. We must try and keep the human body in exactly the same state that it's in right now, despite doing all of these things. And we know through things like climate change that actually we're going to have to learn to cope with a changing environment. And this is just an extension of that, really. So how do we allow a change in our environment for us to engage and be able to live with that, regulating it to make sure people are safe, but not trying to keep the unkeepable? That's a very slightly more drawn out argument than I was expecting to make, but it's
well, okay. So you bring up climate change here on Earth and us trying to get out, but then there's also the ethical considerations of like colonizing other planets and how we treat other ecosystems on other planets from a regulatory standpoint, right? Like, are we going to sort of think about respecting potential these other ecosystems on these other planets to make sure that not only those environments are as littly disturbed as possible? Is that the right way to phrase that? But also the fairness with the resources available on those planets and how we start to think about utilizing those resources on other planets. Is that within the purview of the FAA or this global entity that we're talking about here? Is that within that, or is that something separate? I don't know, because you think about sort of these like economical considerations or the implications that might come along with this. And some countries are not going to have the same resources that other countries have to get to space and to take advantage of these opportunities. And so, like, where's the guidelines that ensure like this fair competition from like a capitalist perspective, preventing these monopolies, ensuring that the benefits from spaceflight is shared in a truly global nature, to not make sure that one country is ruling space, because then it's like United Space of America, and that's just not fun.
But I mean, what's to stop? I mean, it is a really good point, because as soon as you get out of and I don't think a committee of the FAA is going to solve this one. But as soon as you get out of the pull of Earth, literally, then nothing exists. Law does not, any ruling of law just does not exist out there, outside of our own, low Earth orbity type piece. So, what is to stop you, taking a trip to Mars and then just saying, right, I'm having this one. Thank you very much. We back to the Wild West. We back to, possession is 9/10 and all that sort of stuff. How do we not do that? Because we can't do that with the land masses we've got on Earth. Never mind anything else. So I think there is definitely them wider discussions to be had. I mean, I think for me, there's an element there that it brings out in the article, is, do we know enough to be able to actually do some regulation and meaningful regulation? I guess if I bring out these two quotes from it. So Karina Dries, the president of the industry group of Commercial Spaceflight Federation, I didn't even know that existed, said the FAA does not have the expertise, resources, or plan needed to implement a revised occupant safety regulatory framework. She said, allowing the learning period to end this year would open the door to regulations that inadvertently freeze development before industry has had a time to mature, harming safety in the long term and our nation's competitiveness. That's not an unreasonable position to take. Basically, as I read that, she's suggesting that we need to allow companies to keep on doing what they're doing in order for us to learn what's going on. However, the RAND researchers suggested the research, given that commercial spaceflight companies are not required to share safety data publicly, there is a lack of transparency regarding incidents and anomalies and no real way for companies to learn from each other. And that's a really good point, isn't it? Anything that happens at the moment, if things go wrong, so SpaceX had it's Falcon Heavy, the Starship blow up, and nobody truly, even now, truly knows whether that was properly planned, whether it was a catastrophic failure, whether it was all just part of the show. When it blew up after launch, was that unexpected? Was that commanded? Etc. Etc. And there's no piece there to share because of the commercial, aspect.
Right.
People, commercial entities, but are secretive. How do we get them into the same space? Same space, pun. As airlines, where there are certain elements that they do have to share, and there is things that they do need to declare, and they recognize the need to do so because it benefits everybody. Yes, there's still some commercial stuff that they keep to themselves, fuel optimization, all that sort of stuff. Fine, that's down on you, but there are certain elements that need to share. And how do we make sure that happens without falling into the trap of what the industry group suggest, where you're stifling creativity?
Yeah. I mean, I think that just comes down to mandatory reporting of any of these incidents or anomalies during flights. I think, especially when it comes to sort of any spacecraft that contains or is being tested for human spaceflight, that might be how you get around some of the other things. Maybe they test with other vehicles and then there's still going to be the mandated tests for a human spaceflight vessel. But I think, some sort of centralized database that companies have to share the safety data for, a scientific study. You can look at that. And then obviously, like, very similar to the aviation industry, the periodic safety audits, reviews by independent body, entities. I think that might be a good way to tackle some of that. I want to go back to a point that you made about like the law in space. I think a lot of the like international waters types of principles can work out in space too. But I mean, it's another thing to think about. And where does that, like, where do the regulations begin and the laws, or where do the regulations end and the laws begin? they're going to need to think about that. But like, where is that threshold? Is it truly outside of Earth orbit? And but like, we're still going to need to think about the jurisdiction over the craft when it comes to where it's at in its flight and who's responsible for it when. So I mean, there's a lot of things to think about. And I know we're just kind of scratching the surface here, and we could go on and on and on, but I think we need to rein it in a little bit and give our final thoughts here so we can move on to the next part of the show. But Barry, final thoughts. I know it's hard to think about because we talked about so much stuff and it was a great discussion, but
I think so. In the grand scheme of things, I think regulation is a good thing. I think, but it's got to be like touch. It's got to be thoughtful to making sure that we're doing things for the real reason of keeping people safe in what we're doing, without necessarily inhibiting innovation and creativity. And what I fear is that once we get once you start standing up some of these committees, people end up being on the inside of them and then helping commercial entities, and basically it becomes all a bit dirty and tainted. So if we can keep the altruistic view of what it is that we're trying to achieve, then I think it'd be very, very helpful. What do you think, Nick?
yeah, I agree. I think when we think about FAA regulating these, is that necessarily the ultimate end all be all? No, I don't think so. I think we need an international organization to do this and to handle all these questions that we brought up today. Is it a good start? Sure. And we can get a lot of these like framework things in place. But yeah, are they genuinely the best entity to oversee spaceflight safety? Or should we form a new international organization to do so? I think ultimately there's a lot to think about, but these transportation regulations as it relates to spaceflight are truly going to be important, as we saw in the like deep sea tourism sector just a couple weeks ago. That these types of regulations need to exist for safety reasons, but where is that balance? And human factors should be included at the start, and it should be around the safety of humans in spaceflight. And I think that ultimately needs to be carried through with regulations, and that's why we do them. That's why regulations exist, is for safety reasons. So let's make sure that it's truly about safety and not about a company being unable to innovate. And by the way, just one more point on innovation. You and I have talked ad nauseum about how confines and constraints sometimes make innovation happen. And so I think these regulations and putting these companies in boxes could actually force them to think maybe outside the box in some ways that then allows us to get to a greater place. And where that greater place is, I'll let you you all interpret what that is. If that's Mars or Moon or I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with that thought. That's anyway. Thank you to everyone, especially our patrons, for selecting our topic this week, and thank you to our friends over at TechCrunch for our news story. If you want to follow along, we do post the links to the original articles on our weekly roundups in our blog. You can also join us on our Discord for more discussion on these stories and much more. We also do post weekly polls, so you can go and vote on these stories just like the folks did for this story. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back to see what's going on in the human factors community right after this. Are you tired of boring lectures and textbooks on human factors and UX? Well, grab your headphones and get ready for a wild ride with the Human Factors Minute podcast. Each minute is like a mini crash course packed with valuable insights and information on various organizations, conferences, usability methods, theories, models, certifications, tools, and much more. We'll take you on a journey through the fascinating world of human factors, from the ancient history to the latest trends and developments. Listen in as we explore the field and discover new ways to enhance the user experience. From the Think Aloud protocol to the critical incident technique, focus groups, iterative design, we'll make sure that you're the smartest person in the room. Tune in on the 10th, the 20th, and the last day of every month for a new and interesting tidbit related to human factors. Don't miss out on the Human Factors Minute podcast, your ultimate source for all things human factors.
Human Factors Cast brings you the best in human factors news, interviews, conference coverage, and overall fun conversations into each and every episode we produce. But we can't do it without you. The Human Factors Cast network is 100% listener supported. All the funds that go into running the show come from our listeners. Our patrons are our priority, and we want to ensure we're giving back to you for supporting us. Pledges start at just $1 per month and include rewards like access to our monthly Q&As with the hosts, personalized professional reviews, and access to the full library of Human Factors Minute, a weekly podcast where the hosts break down unique, obscure, and interesting human factors topics in just 1 minute. Patreon rewards are always evolving, so stop by patreon.com/humanfactorscast to see what support level may be right for you. Thank you, and remember, it depends.
Yes, huge thank you as always to our patrons. We especially want to thank our Human Factors Cast All Access and VIP patrons, Michelle Tripp and Neil Gainey. Patrons like you truly keep the show running, even in our off weeks. But hey, I want to talk to you, the person listening to this right now. Did you know if you want to have your own discussion with Barry and myself about any topic that you want, there's a Patreon tier for you. You can actually do your own podcast with us. Choose any topic you want. We'll do a Human Factors Cast roundtable. That means you can talk with me and Barry, and we'll talk about anything you want, human factors related or not. We could talk about, I don't know, give me a topic, Barry. We could talk about video games or
medieval swords.
What?
Medieval swords.
There you go. Yeah, we could talk about that. A knife collection, books. I don't care. Whatever it is. There's a tier for you on Patreon if that's of interest to you. If you have, how about this? If you have a paper that you'd like to talk about and let the world know, roundtable. That's your tier. That's what you want to do. You want to just have an hour-long chat about it. We'll do our research. We'll come prepared with questions. We're not going to half-ass the conversation. It's a full-on.
Can I just butt in? We'd have to read the paper. We'd have to read the paper. Wouldn't we?
That's what I'm saying, Barry. Is we'll do our research.
We don't normally read the papers.
We'll read the paper for this. We have to be prepared. See, here's the thing: is that with this,
that's cool.
Yeah, it's very cool. It's a very cool opportunity. If you're interested, there's a tier for you, and you can do that once a month with us. If you have several papers you want to discuss. At this tier, you get one podcast a month with us. We'll sit down. We'll do the whole thing with you. So anyway, that exists. I just wanted to tell you about it because it's cool. Anyway, I think we get into this next part of the show we like to call.
It came from.
That's right. It's my favorite part of the show where Barry gets so annoyed because we talk about the same questions week over week. It's called It Came From. This is where we look all over the internet to bring you topics the community is talking about. If you find any of these answers useful, helpful, give us a like to wherever you're watching or listening to help other people find this content. All right, we have 3 tonight. The first one here from the Human Factors subreddit. This is Figs and Jam. The user, Figs and Jam. They write, I need advice on how to improve my interviewing skills for human factors engineer roles. I've been applying for 7 months, but haven't had any luck. I believe companies prefer candidates with a master's degree, but I have valuable skills and experience in various areas. I'm looking for mentorship and guidance to help me land a job in the field. All right, Barry, what are you thinking?
7 months. That's a long time. I get that, and it can be quite disheartening. With the wrong people to ask in the first instance, the first people you should be asking are the people who've interviewed you. And if you get reached back to the ones you've interviewed and not had jobs with, then they should, if they're any good, actually give you some useful feedback, because it's a small world. The human factors domain is small, and it's in everybody's interest to help everybody grow in that respect. So go back to them. If the comment was said about believing companies prefer candidates with master's degrees, if they do want people with master's degrees, they'll normally put it on the job spec. And if you've got valuable skills and you think that they are better, or your skills are better and your experience means you supersede that idea of a master's degree, then actually that's the biggest thing that you should be saying in your interview. I think we've said before, if you've got 4 or 5 years of experience, that does almost counteract the degree and the academic learning that you get there. So yes, if you've got that amount of experience, you're right. Getting a mentor, great idea, because they can help you. But fundamentally, if you're pitching the same thing every time and not having any success, then there is a level of self-review you've got to do in terms of around saying, why is the pitch I'm giving not landing? And you've got to put some effort into reaching out to the people who've turned you down, but also being honestly reflective. Are you actually giving what the company wants and what you want to give, or are you giving a self-idealized view of what you should be giving? So be honest with yourself. I don't know, Nick, am I being a bit harsh here? Have you got any other thoughts?
No, I don't think you're being harsh. I do have thoughts. So some additional pieces of information that I kind of left out in the. This is a long post, right? And so we edit these for brevity, but I think there's important details here. So bachelor's in biomedical engineering, and they work currently as a hardware engineer. They're applying for positions in biotech and pharma, and I know these positions are very competitive. And so unless there's I think I agree with a lot of the points that you took here, Barry, is that there might be something else that is sort of a consideration. The people that you should be asking for feedback are the people that are giving you the no's. And what is the delta between you and the person that they ultimately ended up hiring? I think if you can get some solid answers around that and just be clear and I want you to be honest with me. I think people are more than happy to give that feedback about maybe what made the other candidates stronger than you in your case. Like I said, I think these are competitive fields. 7 months, though, that's a long time to look for a position. I don't know what's going on there. I truly don't, but I wish you all the best. All right, let's get into this next one here. This one's also on the Human Factors subreddit. This is by Silver Librarian 7190. This is Human Factors jobs with a master's. What are the job prospects for someone with a master's in Human Factors, and what job titles should I be looking for? I think that's the gist of it. Barry, what are you thinking?
The statistics are in your favor. There are way more jobs than people in human factors at the moment. In the UK, when I recently did a keynote or an introduction to a conference, highlighted the fact that there was over 600 vacancies in the UK alone. There's growing human factors requirements around the world, and the actual numbers of available practitioners is decreasing. So if you've got a master's in human factors, absolutely you should be able to nail a job. The sort of, I guess the title you should be looking for is something with human factors in it. So human factors engineer, human factors integration, I guess also branching out into the UX, UI elements of that. But yeah, anything around them sort of things should get you something. I think it's a good time to be in the qualified in the human factors field. There's lots of opportunity.
Yeah, I second that too. I think there's the search terms are particularly interesting. I wouldn't say easy. They're definitely interesting. And I actually want to bring I brought this up for a very specific reason, because Carp CM in our Discord also writes what keywords do you usually search besides human factors? And so I think this is a good time to bring up this discussion that happened in our Discord. So users or user is a good term to use, like user researcher. Ergonomics is another good one to throw in there. I think engineering is a good catch all. I think there are different roles that you might be able to fulfill. Human factors, obviously, is a term that you want to use. Integration, UX, user experience. Yeah.
You in the mix that somebody suggested the other day was actually now starting to search for Scrum Master, because obviously it is a bit of a term and it's a specific role in the Agile community, but Scrum Masters make HF people make really good Scrum Masters, and more people are now starting to think in that way. I first started seeing it come up on a search term only about 3-4 weeks ago. So yes,
that's interesting.
Mm.
Yeah, I think when you think about sort of being fresh out of school, I think someone with a master's versus someone with a PhD versus someone with a bachelor's versus somebody with just experience, there are going to be different types of jobs available to you based on your experience, and school is part of that experience. I don't think master's necessarily limits you from the same jobs that you might look for with levels of experience or with a bachelor's. It might prevent you fresh out of school from getting like a more of a principal investigator role in like a company doing user research, but I don't think that that pathway is blocked off from you, in the long term. I think that PhD candidates probably have a better chance of getting those, like, the first dibs at those jobs. But I think there's a lot of different roles out there that you can look at. And what's interesting from a human factors perspective, just in general, is that we can excel at almost any type of job that involves a doing something better for a person. And so broadening your search to look for human might be another good thing too, or like psychology. I think there's other different approaches that you can take. Methods, research methods. Research is another good one to use. And I think there's just, it depends on sort of specialties, and human factors is this weird melting pot of a lot of different things coming together, but it depends on your expertise and what types of things you're comfortable with doing. But it's a good discussion, I think. Okay, we have one more here. This one is on the UX research subreddit by Blue Rottweiler. How did you become senior? Aged into it. There's they write, as a mid-level UX researcher, I want to become a senior. What skills are needed, and do you have a development plan or actionable list to progress your career? If you transitioned to another subfield, I'd like to hear about that too. Barry, how do you become a senior from a mid-tier role?
I sort of slightly sarcastically put down working hard, but I don't think that's necessarily true as such. I think this idea about having a plan is interesting because I've never had a plan. I've never had the I want to be in this position by this point. However, I've always wanted to be successful at what I do, so never really known what that success looks like. However, fundamentally, I think if you want to become more senior, the obvious way of doing it is through management. You are generally going to be in a position of either managing people, mentoring people, or leading people. And note that managing and leading are not necessarily the same thing. In fact, they're not the same thing. But fundamentally, you're going to get to a point where you need to inspire other people and be able to share some of that knowledge. You're either going to do that through looking after other human factors are UXy people, or you're going to do that as part of a bigger team, say maybe an engineering team or something like that, and you're going to share knowledge and your experience that way. So really, in terms of the skills that I think are critical that that don't necessarily get taught and people just assume that you pick up is learning about leadership, and learning about how to have some of them leadership skills, learning how to manage, and that's managing yourself and managing other people. It doesn't have to be massive in the grand scheme of things, but having some of the ideas about how to plan a project, how to plan a task, basic project management skills is really good. And then the third one is communication. Being able to communicate effectively with your peers, with those above and beneath you, is something, again, I don't think we teach very well, if at all, through educational routes, certainly not in the UK, in the engineering side of things. But if you are an effective communicator, that will help you become more promotable, and become more senior. And then fundamentally, in the grand scheme of things, be able to take responsibility. And if you can take responsibility for things and not just shy away from it, and being able to own the work and be responsible for what you're doing, then that is golden. And that isn't just to become senior. I think that is for me, that is the catalyst for getting you through a career, and advancing throughout any sort of organization. Nick, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm thinking about this in two different ways. I'm thinking about this like leveling up within the organization that you're at currently. You love your position, you want to manage and lead. That's going to be different than another approach that I'm going to mention here. So you're right, Barry. I didn't do when I leveled up from mid to senior, I didn't do the whole what's my plan of action. I just kind of assumed more and more responsibility, and through that responsibility gained the experience to apply to those senior roles. And so I think thinking about what skills a senior has versus a mid-level, that might be what are the deltas between those two. Looking at what skills you need to develop to get to those things, look at senior positions and see what they're doing on those job descriptions. Are you doing those? If so, then you're ready. And if you want to do that internally, then maybe that's a discussion with your manager or HR. But if you're doing those things and you want to seek opportunities externally, then if you're doing those things, then you're ready. Like, I think the action plan would be looking at the deltas of what those things are asking for in the job descriptions and what you're not doing now, and then figuring out how you can sort of patch those things by doing more of those things that are on the job descriptions, right? So like if it does say manage and lead projects, well, then you need to manage and lead projects. And how do you do that? By speaking up and say, hey, I would love to take ownership of this, and I would love to do, people are not going to say no to having somebody else manage something else. In fact, it gets very difficult and cumbersome to manage a lot of different moving parts and pieces. And if you can be the point person for something, then that's a good thing. So that's kind of my advice. Take a look at those deltas and see where perhaps you can patch.
There's a third way, which is apply for it and fake it till you make it.
There's a fourth way too, nepotism. You can do it that way too. And then, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different ways, but I think we're talking about legitimate ways here, Barry. So,
oh right, okay, sorry.
Yeah, fake it until you make it is good too. All right, let's get into this last part of the show. It's just called One More Thing. Barry, it's been a while since we checked in with each other. What's been going on in your life?
Yeah, there's been a lot going on, so I'm going to go for two more things instead of one more thing.
Okay, that's fine. I'll allow it for today.
Firstly, here in the UK, it's GCSE results day, so that means all sort of 16-year-old secondary school children are getting their results, and my daughter got the results that she needed to go on to do her A-levels. So we're all very proud of our Holly back here, which is really cool. The only downside is that she's not going to go and do psychology A-level like I was hoping she, or sociology A-level like I was hoping she was going to, because stupid politics. Anyway. But it's interesting. Again, it opens up that whole debate around the point of actual examinations as opposed to different ways of doing education, which is possibly a topic. If I wanted to host a roundtable, it's something I would like to possibly talk about. But the other new big thing that's happened for me recently is my company, we've moved into new offices. Which is fantastic. We've lived for the past 3 years in a rugby stadium, in a sports stadium, and had a room there. And that's been a really different type of environment for what we've done. We've now moved into, a more traditional office structure where we've got 2 floors of offices between us all. So I'm back to having my own proper office. It's got a sofa in it and all sorts. And I've got a really big meeting room with what we're calling the Imagineering room, which has got whiteboards in it, and it's going to have TVs in there and stuff. And it's just back to more of a space that I feel I can be creative in and things like that. And the rest of the team are happy. We've got a staff room, and we've even got a kitchen and a toilet. So it's just really exciting. And it feels you do these things as a company, I think, where you go and have a really big shake up, a change of scenery, and it reinvigorates everybody and feels like not a new beginning, but a new challenge and a new start. So I'm quite excited to see what this change brings us. So yeah, that's quite cool. Nick, what about you? What's been going on with you?
I've been spending a lot of time on the Big Brother live feeds. So if you're unfamiliar, Big Brother's a television show that hosts a certain number of individuals in a house where they have no phones, and they compete for various things, and one by one they're eliminated from the house. Okay. This season is very interesting because the casting decisions that they've made for the people that go into the house, they're just ordinary people in a lot of cases, and they've put a good combination of people in there that make it for a wonderful chaotic time. They're not good game players, but the feeds are amazing to watch because they're all making these really bad moves. It's just hilarious to watch the paranoia that is happening. So there's a room that you get when you are head of household, which holds responsibilities for putting two people up for eviction, and then there's a way to veto it. And anyway, there's a whole different plan. And suffice it to say, the people in the HOH room this year, head of household room, have been just massive levels of paranoia, and no head of household has gone smoothly. In fact, every head of household so far has been evicted, or we're thinking that they are going to be evicted, in terms of tonight would be the second HOH evicted. And it's just been a pleasure to watch. It's like the best television show because people are just so paranoid in this house and they never stop gaming, and it's just amazing to watch. So, yeah, I guess that's my media recommendation for the week. And the show, like, I feel so bad for the editors. Like, as somebody who's edited content before, it's just like there's so much stuff. Years of things happen. And like the meta commentary of like following along with Reddit threads as things are happening live, and like finding all these moments and just figuring out how terrible some people are, that other people have idolized in the past, is just like amazing. And just crazy. Human psychology at its best. So, Big Brother live feeds, that's my recommendation. Anyway, that's it for today, everyone. If you like some of the discussion around deep space, or space in general, I'll encourage you to go listen to episode 283, where we talked about surviving deep space missions. Comment wherever you're listening and what you think of the story this week. For more in-depth discussion, you can always join us on our Discord community. Visit our official website, sign up for our newsletter, stay up to date with all the latest Human Factors news. If you like what you hear, you want to support the show, there's a couple things you can do. One, you can leave us a 5-star review wherever you're watching or listening right now. It's free for you to do. 2, you can tell your friends about us. That really helps the show grow. And 3, if you have the financial means to and or want to have your own podcast, why don't you head on over to Patreon and help support the show that way? As always, links to all of our socials and our website are in the description of this episode. Mr. Barry Kirby, thank you for being on the show today. Where can our listeners go and find you if they want to talk about how they can get a Diet Coke on their space flight?
If you want to come chat with me, find me on social media, normally under Baz_K. If you want to find me on X, which that just anyway. But if you want to listen to some interesting interviews with personalities and people around the Human Factors world, then find me on 1202, the Human Factors Podcast at 1202podcast.com.
As for me, I've been your host, Nick Roome. You can find me on our Discord and across social media at Nick_Roome. Thanks again for tuning into Human Factors Cast. Until next time,
it
depends. Music.
There we go. Yay.
Hey.
Oh, that was good. That was fun. It's
There are some shows that I just feel so proud of, and that was one of them. That was a really good one.
It's always, you can always tell when it's good, and actually, I always think it's I think we said this before. It's the stories that you don't necessarily think are going to be sparking that much conversation that you suddenly look down and you realize, oh, it's nearly 10 past the hour. We need to wrap this up.
Mm-hmm.
And which is good. Your Big Brother conversation, I think, was really interesting because that must mean that we must be due a new series out soon, which is good. I was such a fan of Big Brother when it first came out, and then it kind of went off the boil because it got too contrived. But have you seen Traitors? the traitors.
No.
So new program that's come out. So you do have an episode out you do have a series out in the States because we watched it. But it's really well worth watching. It's basically you put 22 people inside, in this case in a Scottish castle, and they all meet together, and then on the first, so then they get together on the first night and in this big round table, and 3 of them get told without anybody else knowing they're traitors. And the idea is that they're going to murder somebody every night.
It's werewolf.
Somebody else said that. I haven't seen werewolves, so I don't know that. But
It's a
basically,
game or mafia. It's the same thing. It's
right. So they get to the end of it, and if there's any traitors left in the circle when they dole out the money, then the good people lose and the traitors take everything. And so they did an English version of this. And then they did an American version pretty much straight after in the same location with a different host. But in the English version, they used complete civilians. Then in the American version, they used a half normal people, half celebrities. And then we've recently watched the Australian version. And the Australian version is completely brilliant. That they do it slightly differently again. So as this format is emerging, it's really, really, really well worth watching. And I would watch all 3 of them, from the different countries, to see. You get the different psychological makeup, you get the different cultural, behavioral things, and you can see that what the producers are doing to tweak how they've progressed and tweaked things slightly as the format's evolved, even just over these 3 episodes, 3 different series from 3 different countries. It's brilliant.
amazing.
It sort of takes the Big Brother thing, and just takes it that. It just points it in a slightly different direction. Really good.
Amazing. Yeah. I love the, like, I don't know. I feel like human factors or psychology people could be really good at designing some of these reality TV shows.
But they're also really rubbish as contestants. It's really, because again, with some of these, you see them. I think there's been a couple who reckon that they're psychologists or they're really into psychology and all that sort of stuff. And you're just like, they almost overplay it, which is really interesting to see. Yeah, I'd love to participate, but I also know I'd be really crap, really rubbish. So yeah, I don't know.
I tend to think that I'd be okay. I tend to think I'd be like an okay participant on one of these. If anything, because of the way in which we operate in our day-to-day. I think because we unify, it would be very easy to like be a conflict mediator or that voice of reason in the house, but also the person that subtly evangelizes their agenda. Oh man, it could be really good.
Yeah, I think it's sort of, for me, it kind of flips both ways. I think what's been really interesting to watch is some people who played the game really, really well, then almost just 1 week, one conversation has just spoiled it all for them, and it's been brilliant. So yeah, that's thoroughly recommended. Really cool.
The amazing thing about this season of Big Brother is that they're just like, nobody's a good player. Even so, they have a veteran like Survivor alum in there that's been on Survivor 4 times, widely regarded as one of the best players of Survivor that has never won. Right. And they gave her a really unfair advantage by putting her and her son both in the house, and nobody knows that except for one person who followed her social media and is like a stalker and is like a it's an amazing dynamic because this person is like really crazy, over games, always is gaming, and just the way that this Survivor person operates is she matches energy of other people. And so because this person who has like this crazy energy and is always gaming, she's matching that energy and is making some really bad game moves, but is completely insulated because of her ability to maintain social relationships. And cool. Like, just I want to watch the steamroll stop, and there's some really interesting things. So tonight, actually, after the live eviction, there's going to be the pressure cooker, which is a competition that they haven't had since the 6th season, and we're now in the 25th season, where they basically put everybody in a box, and the way that you win head of household is you just put your finger on a button, and the last person to remove their finger from the button gets the head of household. And it's the longest game that's been ever played. It's like 14 hours was the longest they've gone. And there's some really interesting house dynamics right now that is going to force everybody to want to keep their thumb on that button for as long as they can. It's really good. It's just really good. And you can watch it all and just so good. So good. Hey, I have another topic that I'd love to bring up though, because I need help. Can I ask for help?
You can always ask.
Okay. I don't know where this came from.
Right.
No, seriously, I have no idea where this came from, what device it came with. I have on my desk a little bag with a little device in it. Okay, now I'm going to show this up close, but let me describe what it is. So it looks like you put a USB-C into one end, and on the other side is a USB-C. So on one side, USB-C female, and one side USB-C male. And on it is written 40 gigabytes per second. Okay, I don't know if you can see that. It's written 40 gigabytes per second. I'm not focusing in on it. But it's just female on one side, male on the other. I don't know what the purpose of this is. What the heck is this for?
An adapter from USB-C to USB-C. That's
yes.
awful.
Why would you need an adapter to go from the same? Why do you need this? What is this for?
I am just trying to look now and see.
I have no idea. It's been sitting in this bag on my desk. I'm afraid to get rid of it because I don't want to, like, you know, if it's needed for.
Hold on. What's that? It looks like it is. Is this? I think it's a USB-C to Thunderbolt adapter. Let me just. So. Right, so it's so you can use a Thunderbolt 4 cable with a USB-C docking hub, I think.
Oh.
Because in this amazing world where we said that everything should be USB-C, obviously people have then produced different versions of USB-C, and obviously Thunderbolt is one of them. But I'm seeing lots of different things like that look like a Thunderbolt to USB-C adapter, which is effectively, I think, what you're talking about.
What the hell's the difference between? Is Thunderbolt just like faster?
Thunderbolt is it's more of a an Apple. Well, I think it started off as an Apple thing. Thunderbolt also is about power delivery and 8K screens, whereas USB-C can be a lot less.
So you put it's USB-C on the male side, and the Thunderbolt goes into the other side.
I think so. Does it have a lightning bolt on what looks like a lightning bolt on one end?
No lightning bolt, just 40 gigabytes per second. No lightning bolt on it. No lightning bolt.
So
that's why I'm confused. Like,
yeah, no, I think then it is because actually these ones don't have it. Technically, USB-C is fully USB. So I think the Thunderbolt 4 goes into the female, and then the male piece would go into your USB-C port on whatever you're bringing it into. So that means that does that go to the display?
Or why wouldn't you just put Thunderbolt in there? That's what I don't get. Is like why would Thunderbolt be bad to put into a USB-C thing? Would it fry something?
Because Apple, I think. Now let me just. So works perfectly for Chromebooks. I'm not even going to pretend why this is a good idea. But there does seem to be a lot of them on Amazon. A lot of these adapters. Because I think because I wanted because proper decent size power supply USB-C cables are really expensive, and effectively need to be Thunderbolt as far as I'm aware. I don't know what the full difference is. You have reached the maximum of my understanding and knowledge at this point.
What's the point of a USB-C to USB-C adapter?
So a lot of people are using them for if you've got a USB-C cable that works with it. So if you've got a Thunderbolt hub, so USB hub, you can use it for that. Which is my CalDigit a Thunderbolt? Don't think it is. My CalDigit is a USB-C, but you can get a Thunderbolt version. Yeah, I don't know why you'd want it.
I'm just so confused. I don't know what it's for. I don't know why it exists.
I'll tell you, I understand the what, I just don't understand the why. Oh well.
Okay, so I got no answers. But thank you. I appreciate the Google foo. I appreciate the effort.
Just don't throw it away.
I'm not going to throw it away. In case somebody's listening to this, please let me know on our Discord if you're listening to this later and is like, oh no, I totally know what that's for.
And yeah, you need to put it in that box, which I'm sure you must have, of adapters, stroke stuff. I'm not entirely sure what it's for, but I won't throw it away just in case it comes in useful.
Yeah.
I have a massive box like that. Amanda keeps on wanting me to throw all of them out, and my executive assistant Joe keeps on doing the same thing. They want to label them and throw them all out. And I'm like, but no, because I don't know if it might be useful. And as soon as you throw it out, the very moment you throw it out will be the time when you actually need it.
Yep, exactly.
Laptop adapters is exactly the same.
So can I mention something else that happened that I almost listed as my one more thing, but did not?
Yep.
I'm developing an affinity for strapping pieces of tech together. So obviously I've talked about my mobile UX kit. Okay. And I've talked about Steam Deck, and
you
want to guess what I did with the Steam Deck?
Go on then.
So there's a little like built-in dock that you can strap right on the back of it. It comes with like a little kickstand, so you can kick it up. It plugs right into the USB-C. You can plug it into USB, and it fits all. It's great. So that sticks on it. And now the problem is that sometimes when I'm gaming, my deck runs out of battery.
Mm-hmm.
And so I bought oh geez, did I get rid of the box? I must have got rid of the box. I bought a well, not this one, but I bought, one of these battery packs, right? And I was like, oh well, this will charge it while I'm playing. And but I don't want it to be like, holding the Steam Deck and having this thing like dangling off. So I bought a magnet kit and slapped it on the back of the dock. And then I put the metal strip on one of these. And so this is like hanging off the back of the Steam Deck, and it plugs in and it charges it while I'm playing. It's really heavy, but it works.
Cool.
And I'm just developing an affinity for like strapping things onto other things, like, as evidence with this.
I've been half inspired by your development of custom trial kit, because when I was out running trials the other week, we're in the middle of a field and doing stuff, and I realized what I'm missing in my life is a trials van, which is a van that is almost like a welfare van. It's like half a camper van, I guess, where you've got some seating in there. You get a kettle so you can make a hot drink and all that sort of stuff. but also with space in the back for putting all of your trials kits, so your high vis kit, any of your like the tablets and the ability to charge your tablets, your laptops for any measurements you need to make, your cameras and all that sort of stuff, and the ability to maintain it, all in a branded van that you can rock up to wherever it is that you're doing some sort of physical trial and just look the part. So I'm looking for a particular van. I'm also looking for a job that will pay for the van. That's a different that's a different issue. But I hope by this time next year I'm going to have my own trials van and I'm going to love it.
I love it.
So because we've also potentially looking at another sort of ergonomic spin-off. It's not a different part of the company that's going to do some different things where this is going to be a part of it as well. But the other thing I was going to mention on my one more thing, and didn't because I was taking liberties, was I had the pleasure of doing a keynote speech last week. So I got invited along to do a keynote to an engineering conference, massive international engineering conference. It was brilliant, which included the former Deputy Prime Minister of North Macedonia. I mean, that's a title. And he's also basically a professor who's a really knowledgeable in innovation and things like that. Really interesting bloke to listen to. But I got asked, so you've got all these engineering people talking about everything from quantum computing through to other innovations and stuff. And I got asked to do my piece. And it's possibly one of the hardest presentations I put together in a long time, because you sit there and say, well, I could just no matter, because without being cynical, when you're keynoting, you could talk for 40 minutes and people will or will not take notice of you. It matters not. You said something, you get some photos, they've listened to you, you get thanked and all that sort of jazz. But actually, if you want to make a difference and actually use it for good, or to make to impact what people are doing, they're quite a hard thing to put together, because you don't, especially with this, because you don't know exactly your audience as such, because it was hybrid. You had people from around the world listening to it. But actually, when I put it together, I'd spent the weekend putting it together and trying it. The kids got really bored of listening to me talking about practicing, and I always happy to walk around the garden practicing what I'm going to say and then being able to rehash it and stuff. And but actually, by the end of it, it was possibly one of the most enjoyable presentations I've done in quite a long time, because I'd actually felt that it was something new, something different, and I got really good response at the end of it. So yeah,
is that available somewhere? I'd love to watch that.
I don't think they recorded it as such. I think they recorded bits of it, and I think I saw a video with some bits of it out today, but I don't think it got a full on recording. It might have done, because it was done through Teams and stuff. So I don't know. That's a question I could possibly. I will ask them.
I would love to get access to that. Like, what was the topic?
I talked about the need for communication in or the art of putting the human first and communicating engineering and human factors.
I love it.
Considering as human factors people, we meant to make things really simplistic and really easy use, most user friendly. I had the longest title I've ever put together for a presentation, because they'd asked me to talk, and I said yes, of course, no problem. And they said, what's your title going to be? And I was like, took the name of the conference and put human factors at the front of it, and then worked out what I was going to say afterwards.
Yeah, so I'd love to watch that. If you can get a recording of that, that'd be super cool.
Yeah, I will try my best.
Okay.
Because actually, it's something I quite like to cut up myself.
Yeah, you should always make it a best practice to like get into Restream and just record yourself while you're doing those things too.
Yeah, I do. So I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because actually, the other day I was driving along in the car, and suddenly, so I was listening to one podcast. It ended, and then this other one came on that was talking about the use of AI in hospitals. Like, oh, that's interesting. I've done that. Didn't tweak for a good couple of minutes. I was listening to myself, which was just bizarre. It was one I did with Kate, and I was like, oh, that's really interesting. And I was like, oh, I'm educating myself. I need to shut up now. Change. But yes, it is really interesting to listen back to yourself. I don't do it very often, but I do think it is something that you should do.
Well, even like the documentation aspect of it and being able to chop it up and put out stuff.
Yeah, it's yes, you're right. It's something I've never really considered deliberately doing.
This is what I'm saying or was saying earlier with the resources available. Like there's so many webinars that happen that are not recorded, that are not accessible publicly, that don't have like key takeaways that you can share and proliferate with the community, which really upsets me in a lot of ways. Like fundamentally, we should be sharing information and not gatekeeping. Yes. I understand why it's done. I do. That was one of the reasons why I started this, is to share information.
Well, we've been doing it. We're part of a local engineering group, and we do webinars, and they do record them on Zoom and Teams and stuff. But because the technology, because the presenter doesn't necessarily know it's been recorded, and you don't have, I just think I get frustrated. I don't think hybrid presentations are good. I think they're neither one nor the other. But that's a horse I get on quite often. But I've sort of said, look, if you've got all these recordings, I'll take them, I'll splice them, and we'll cut them up into social media bits so we can share more of what we're doing. And so I've now got access to a few of them, and they're just not good enough. They're just not. They're neither one nor the other. That either you're not seeing the slides right, or the audio isn't necessarily brilliant, and there's just because normally you could turn around and say, well, actually, I'll take the slides and the audio, and that'll do. But because the way it's done, it just doesn't work very well. So I'm going to try and I want to create some more guidance on how we do that sort of stuff. So then you've got tangible assets you can use.
Yeah, audio you can fix.
Yes, I think
the visual aspect of it. Yeah, that's something else. That like, is there a compelling message though? And that's something that like there's always that aha moment when you're listening to something or watching something, and you're like, dang, got it.
Yeah,
gonna take that back. And those are the moments that like should be captured in these webinars.
And they're not. They're just seen as you delivered a webinar. Well done.
Yeah,
like, and just such a non-event in many cases.
And also like this whole like there needs to be a larger. God, I struggle with this too. It's like there needs to be a larger effort for us to tell stories, because I think we have such a critical piece of the puzzle when it comes to relating what it is that people are doing. We need to be able to tell these stories in a compelling way that invites other people to listen and to take away the things. And not all of us are orators. Not all of us are storytellers. But if you're listening to this, I think you should go and watch a couple videos on storytelling. And I just realized we're over time. Like I just realized that we've been talking all right, let's just do a quick check-in. If you want to vote on next week's stories, go here. Let's click on that linky thing. And it looks like as of now, we might be talking about the trash heap that is Twitter. If you don't want to talk about the trash heap that is Twitter, you can vote on some of the other stories there. Anyway, it's late for Barry, and I'm gonna go and lay on a heat pad for a little bit longer. And I'm glad we're back. This was a fun episode. I had a blast. Looks like we're talking, and the fun never ends here at Human Factors Cast.
Cool. All right, well, have a good one. Hope your back feels better soon, and then we shall catch you later.
All right, see y'all next time. Bye, everybody. Bye. Are you tired of boring lectures and textbooks on human factors and UX? Well, grab your headphones and get ready for a wild ride with the Human Factors Minute podcast. Each minute is like a mini crash course packed with valuable insights and information on various organizations, conferences, usability methods, theories, models, certifications, tools, and much more. We'll take you on a journey through the fascinating world of human factors, from the ancient history to the latest trends and developments.
Listen in as we explore the field and discover new ways to enhance the user experience. From the Think Aloud protocol to the critical incident technique, focus groups, iterative design, we'll make sure that you're the smartest person in the room. Tune in on the 10th, the 20th, and the last day of every month for a new and interesting tidbit related to human factors. Don't miss out on the Human Factors Minute podcast, your ultimate source for all things human factors.
Human Factors Cast brings you the best in human factors news, interviews, conference coverage, and overall fun conversations into each and every episode we produce. But we can't do it without you. The Human Factors Cast network is 100% listener supported. All the funds that go into running the show come from our listeners. Our patrons are our priority, and we want to ensure we're giving back to you for supporting us. Pledges start at just $1 per month and include rewards like access to our monthly Q&As with the hosts, personalized professional reviews, and access to the full library of Human Factors Minute, a weekly podcast where the hosts break down unique, obscure, and interesting human factors topics in just 1 minute. Patreon rewards are always evolving, so stop by patreon.com/humanfactorscast to see what support level may be right for you. Thank you, and remember,